A recent survey conducted by PRRI examines the prevalence of Christian nationalism across the United States, building on previous research by scholars like Andrew Whitehead and Sam Perry. The survey uses 5 agree disagree questions to measure support for Christian nationalism, revealing that about 3 in 10 Americans can be classified as Christian nationalism adherents or sympathizers, while 2/3 are Christian nationalism skeptics or rejectors. Despite relatively stable levels of support over the past year, Christian nationalist sentiments have gained influence, particularly within the MAGA movement and the Republican Party. The author argues that Christian nationalism perpetuates the idea of America as a promised land for European Christians, fundamentally undermining democracy and increasing political polarization. Until the influence of Christian nationalism is addressed, it will continue to hinder progress toward a truly democratic American future. This story is from PRRI by Robert P. Jones on February 28th, 2024. Eli, I'm curious about your thoughts.
So, I I guess 30% of people adhering to or supporting or sympathizing with Christian nationalism. I guess that's, I mean, lower than I think I might have expected. I would have expected. I mean, I guess when you compare it to the number of Christians that you encounter, but it's important to separate Christian from Christian nationalist. A lot of this article was just numbers. There was a video webinar of the survey launch. I didn't get a chance to watch, but I noticed that Catherine Stewart was among the commenters in that video, and she is the author of the book, The Power Worshipper Inside the Dangerous Rise of Religious Nationalism. That is the basis of Rob Reiner's film that you, Jonathan, and some others covered a few weeks ago. God and Country, the one that's about Christian nationalism around the United States. So I just noticed that name, just noticed that link there. So this is something she had some comments about it that I didn't get a chance to hear that. She's educated on this topic, but just kind of looking at the numbers here, 10% of the participants adhere to Christian nationalism, meaning they are they live by those tenets, those ideas. 20% sympathize with it. 37%, the highest category, are skeptical. 30% rejected, which is a good, promising number. 30% provided no feedback. Surprising nobody, 55% of Republicans and people who hold a favorable view of Donald Trump were identified as either adherents or sympathizers. But I think anybody saw that coming, right? Red state residents are twice as likely to be adherents or sympathizers than blue state residents. Shocker. So not surprising results here overall. I noticed North Dakota was among the states with the highest percentage of adherents or sympathizers. That did surprise me a little. I would have expected like Florida or Texas maybe to be, but they were lower even than Missouri, where I live. So that was a little bit surprising there. But overall, just regarding Christian nationalism, it is a terrifying thing. I talked about this before. I talked about it a few weeks ago. I'll talk about it again. There's nothing good to come from this ideology. I don't want to live in a theocracy. I don't want to live in a country where religion plays any part in the government, let alone a central role. I think these beliefs not only perpetuate, but I think even more sinisterly potentiate harm that otherwise would not be potentiated, would not exist, and provides no novel benefit. And there's nothing that religion can do that cannot otherwise be done or be accomplished without religion. We don't need it. I don't want it. You can put it back in your churches and keep it there. We don't want it in the government. And that basically sums up my thoughts. Helen, what do you think?
So when I was reading over this article, I like the numbers, they stand out. Though, like a lot of, a lot of my, thought going is like, well, why do people think this way? Why, and is this so important to them? And because they don't want democracy. They want a theocracy with, their God King as at the tall head having all the power. And I always say this, they want freedom for me and not for these. So so I went did some snooping, and I found this really good article from Yale for the Institute for Social and Policy Studies, and it's an article on understanding white nationalism. And a sociologist, Samuel L. Perry, of the University of Oklahoma, Gorky was doing a presentation on this, and what they said was, we want there to be a deeper and clearer understanding of what white nationalism is, Gorky said. And it's a term even 5 years ago what you wouldn't hear outside of a seminar room, but since January 6th, attack on the Capitol, it started to circulate in national newscasts, sometimes applying to any set of ideas people don't like. We want to be clear that it's not all Christians, not all white people. So this really kind of got me thinking, because this isn't based on any sort of rationality. It is based of resentment and fear. And the people that want this to happen, they have resentments and fear and anger inside of them. And then popular politicians come along and saying, like, I can save you. I'll make it better, and all these people you don't like, I'm going to help bring God's country into the United States. And all the people that you don't like, we're going to get rid of them somehow. They're going to lose their rights. We're going to, and this will be your country, God and country, and you have your God King at the head, and all his political pundits are going to take care of you, and you will be proven right. And that's disturbing. I hate to say it. And what I was really surprised was that Hispanic Protestants make up 55% of Christian nationalists, which I was like, wow. Because again, I have to remember myself, it's not all white people. I'm so used to white people being the assholes. But it got me to thinking, I'm curious of the background where if it was like people from Cuba that grew up in communist Cuba, and their grandparents and parents have, brought this rhetoric forward, and they've taken up this idea of, religion, their own version of religion, the Christian religion, and then put, nationalism on top of it. And they want to live in what they perceive as a capitalistic democracy, but really you're going to be living under a theocracy, but that's better than living in a communist country. And the rhetoric that, the radical left, and Biden is on the radical left. I'm like, is he? Because I don't think so, but okay. So
nowhere near radical left. He is nowhere
it's
near
not
radical
even.
left. Not even
And I have to. I think these things through. I'm curious about people. I'm curious about a lot of things. I have to remind myself that they're coming from emotion. They're not coming from logic. So, I'm kind of, it's been reading all the statistics was a little difficult because it is so prevalent. I mean, it's not the majority. Think baby Jesus, think Satan, think Muhammad, think whatever. Think Carl Sagan, whatever. But what I'm going to say is that doesn't mean that people won't turn, and we're heading towards a very big decision. And I'm deeply, deeply concerned, because I don't want to live in a theocracy. I like my freedom. It's nice here. I like, I live in the opposite land, but I can still come online and give comments and speak out against hate speech and think that believe in a religion is all bullshit. I have the freedom to do that right now. And I really would like for anyone to express their opinions. And I don't want to see that getting taken away. And so it's concerning. I have more to say about it, but I'm going to pass it on to John because now I'm sad. I'm going to quack my dog.
Well, yes, Ducky, yes. There is bigotry in the house. But anyway, the PRRI survey was of 6,000 people. Not a large sample, but it was internally consistent. And it had a high Cronbach's alpha value of 0.92. That's a 0 to 1 calculated value that gives you the consistency of the multiple answers. So it's important to know that the people aren't flipping sides in the middle of the questions, right? And it's example. Participants give a high response for one of the items, they are also likely to provide high responses for the other items. So that gives it a kind of consistency across the words that are being used.
Is that also like asking the same question multiple times in different words to see if the answers are consistent?
Yeah, they usually do that in PRRI surveys. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But that factor is actually a statistical factor. And the definition I got from the example I got was from statisticsbyjim.com. So I don't want to give him, but I guess I just did. So anyway, but
shout out to Jim.
Yeah, shout out to Jim. Not to confuse people with statistics, but the more you know. Another excerpt from PRRI study, the question asks, respondents were asked whether they completely agree, or mostly disagree, or completely disagree with each of the following statements. And there's a link to, you can go to www.prri.org/research/a Christian nation understanding the threat of, you'll see it. Each respondent was given a composite score of 0.0 to 1 based on their answers to the 5 questions. The U.S. government should declare America a Christian nation. That was number 1. Number 2, U.S. laws should be based on Christian values, whatever those are. Number 3, if the U.S. moves away from our Christian foundations, we will not have a country anymore, as if it had Christian foundations. 4, being a Christian, this is the most vile one, I think, in my mind. Being Christian is an important part of being truly American. Oh. God has called Christians to exercise dominion over all areas of American society. Something that
where's that in the Bible? Where's that?
Helen had kind of gone into that a little bit, and they were assigned to 4 key groups: adherents, sympathizers for Christian nationalism, skeptics, and rejectors. Notice that the skeptics, Christian national skeptics, had a score of 0.01 to 0.49, and that's 0.49. That means they actually answered yes to a couple of those. So that gives me a little bit of hesitation.
Strong agrees.
But anyway, there are less likely than rejectors to completely disagree. Right, exactly. So that's 39%. The adherents to Christian nationalism are 10%. The Christian nationalist sympathizers are 19%. So the Christian nationalism rejectors, who score 0, these, in other words, all of those are rejected. Like me, I'm one of those. Mm-hmm. These Americans completely disagree with all 5 statements in the scale. This group includes 29% of Americans, which counteracts both skeptics, both sympathizers and adherents for Christian nationalism. They're equal to that. So the number of people to that. So, and that's going to be kind of interesting. We're doing 30%, and is the rest of them in the middle. But actually, and it's just don't really believe it, but might have answered a couple of those in the affirmative. So the one that bothers me again is real Americans need to be Christian. That means not just a citizen, but Christian. This implies that you as a non-Christian ought not to have the same rights or votes as Christians. And I think that was mouthed by a certain bitch in Congress, almost identically to that. So, we shall remain nameless because I don't like naming people because that gives them power. So anyway, old Wiccan thing. Anyway, as we have, exactly. We've covered this here before. We need to convince the rest of sympathizers and skeptics of Christian nationalism that any answer in the affirmative to these questions is absolutely wrong-headed. There is no compromise. We are not a Christian country. We were founded as and have continued to be a secular nation, ruled by law, not whim or religious thinking or magical thinking. Since our founding, history cannot be rewritten. Facts are not negotiable. Internet folks, religious pluralism is written into law. They're here in the United States. You are duty-bound to follow the law, serve when asked, jury duty, etc., military in my case. This is the duty of a citizen. Citizenship comes with responsibilities: voting, use crosswalks, stop at red lights, move over for emergency vehicles, and to name just a few, we have responsibilities. So anyway, there's more to that, but I just get tired of people saying, I want all my freedom, but I don't want to have any responsibilities for it. There are consequences to everybody's actions. And so if you're, I might go on for a little bit more of a rant and then I'm going to shut up. We ought to take this threat of Christian nationalism to heart. Call out these traitors, because that's what they are. When you hear them spouting their hatred in public, do not let them use religion as an excuse to abuse marginalized communities and create an autocratic or authoritarian government, and thus end the United States as a free country and cast us all into a dystopian world where only the strongest survive. So please start thinking about what you're doing and what your responsibilities are as a citizen. And if you don't like that, go find another place to live. And, because that's part of being an American, is respecting everybody's rights. So I'm going to shut up now.
Like the fact that so many people still think that this is the Christian nation founded on Christian, no, the Mayflower was full of people fleeing. They left England to go to the Netherlands and left the Netherlands to come here on the Mayflower to flee persecution from the church because they were Protestants and they weren't Catholics.
The state.
Exactly. The church and the state. And they're like, first things first, don't fucking do that again. And everybody's like, let's do that again. No.
I also before you go, Cynthia, I do have something that you said, John, about they wanted to be a Christian nation, but we know there are Christians that are fighting against this shit. So do they get to be citizens, or do they have to be a special Christian?
No, because they're not real Christians. You know that they're not real Christians.
No,
and they're not of the sect that wants to run things.
Of a Christian.
Yeah, 3/5 of a Christian. There you go.
They're not Christians at all because they just don't believe the same things they do. And their version of the Bible isn't the King James. And it's, it goes into detail. There are 40,000 sects in the Christian church.
Yeah, that's right. Around the world. Listen, Jonathan,
we're not going to go there.
We're not going to go there about. Now listen, the only real Bible is the King James version of the Bible. I don't listen to that other type of Bible because that ain't the God speech, you dig? If I don't hear for out thou with it, It is not God's word.
If it's not Elizabethan English, it doesn't count.
That's right. Damn near.
I'm gonna have to get rid of my English Standard Version then.
Yeah, just throw out
the real Bible.
Throw out Oxford. Throw out all that. Okay, we need Elizabethan. Okay, that's what we need now.
You need a bougie English person.
Right. I mean, like
your religion,
pre-Bridgerton language. That's what we're talking about. Yes,
Bridgerton.
Or like King Arthur.
Yes. Let's go ahead and pull out.
Where dragons were a legitimate threat.
Yes, they were. Guys, as in the Bible. This has nothing to do with the Christian nationalism article, but I'm going to bring us back because that's what conductors do. Now, guys, I know that, like, Jonathan, you talked about, like, how a lot of the numbers, like, broke off as far as, like, about sympathizers and adherents and rejectors and skeptics. But, Helen, I wanted to go back to a point that you brought up concerning Hispanic and Black voters as far as like how they fell into this survey. Now, according to the original PRRI article, Jonathan, I believe that the sample size they said that they used was like 22,000 across all 50 states. But regardless of that, I ended up actually finding an MSNBC article that was written by Althea Butler, who is who I got a chance to meet at an FFRF conference.
Ooh, cool.
And yes, and she is also the author of White Evangelical Racism, The Politics of Morality in America. And she talked about specifically about the differences of like, where like white Christian national evangelical people versus Black Christian national evangelical people will actually fall upon this particular scope. Now, according to the PRRI survey, roughly 3 in 10 Black Americans, 21 sympathizers, 12% adherents, and then roughly 3 in 10 Hispanic Americans, 20% sympathizers and 9% adherents, and roughly about 3 in 10 multiracial Americans, 19% sympathizers and 8% adherents. Now, I know that, like, Helen, like you were saying, well, I was kind of surprised to see like that you had a pretty sizable amount of, of his Hispanic sympathizers and also adherents. Now, but one of the things that I think that what I have found in research that I've done in the past, especially when it comes to political lies, is that you still have about 40% of Hispanic Americans that identify racially as white. Because remember, Hispanic is not a race. It is an ethnicity according to the United States. And then you also have to you also have to think about this. This is a multinational group. Okay, so people like different people adhering to different nationalities within that group have different cultures, have different values, and may even have like different histories that will make them lean a certain way politically. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's something that we have to keep in mind here. Now, what was interesting that Althea said, Dr. Butler, in the MSNBC article, is that she said that she found that politically Blacks who identify as Christian nationalists tend to also identify as Democrat, but the white and Hispanic groups are more likely to be Republican. Now, and I think that kind of goes back to like, some of those other demographics that I mentioned previously. But I'm curious, when I read that statement from her, is it appropriate to call those who happen to be Black, who are sympathizers and adherents, who are not sympathizers and adherents, but still consider themselves Christian nationalists? I personally am wrestling with that because as we have mentioned already, that because you are Christian does not make you a Christian nationalist. Mm-hmm. And as Helen mentioned, that there are Christian groups that have organized and even partnered with secular groups to fight against Christian nationalism. Okay. So I don't think that it's appropriate. I would have to disagree with her on the whole premise that these are considered Christian nationalists. I don't think that they are, because like if you're, there is a specific ideology that Christian nationalists actually adhere to, vote by, and even have like constructed their entire political worldview around. Okay. And that's to make a theocratic society in the United States that they think that this is something that God wants, that is mostly favorable to people of European descent in the United States. So, you know, regardless of any of these things, and then I'm going to pass it on, we still have to be very careful, because like, even though that regardless of skeptics and I'm not skeptics, but adherents, and also sympathizers, these are still a smaller group that is very loud, and they do have key people that are in power that are constructing policy. And that is the concern, right? And so I think that it's very important for any of us to be educated and aware of this group, because we have to consider that if you have adherents and sympathizers representing you in legislative, judiciary, and executive positions, they're going to actually dictate your way of life. And that is scary. Eli, what are your final thoughts?
I'm going to break in and say you're right. It is 22,000. There was a report that I was quoting, which was from 2022. This one's from 2024.
23. Right. Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, but go ahead.
So this even scarier thing is that the three other stories we've already covered this week are a result of this.
Yeah.
You know, the death of Nex Benedict. My mind is blanking right now, but the other things that we've covered this week, the Surgeon General in Florida sending kids to school who aren't vaccinated for measles in the midst of an outbreak. These are the result of this. And I think I've heard in the last couple of months or so, somebody on this show said that or I heard somewhere, I believe it's something like if 30% of a country supports a fascist ideology, that is all you need to take over that country.
That's
and
right.
We're looking at these numbers right here.
Yeah, critical mass. That's all you need.
And that's kind of that's where we're at, and that's it's a reality to think about at this point. Helen, you have anything else to add?
So I want to make a slight correction to what I said. The 55% of Hispanics are Protestant Hispanics, and the Christian nationalism has its roots in Protestantism. So that ideology is already being pushed on, and like you said, it can be pushed among. We tend to think it is like just white Christians, and it is like, we want to be honest that it is not all Christians, is not every single white person that's a Republican. This is a diverse issue because it's a diverse problem. Right. And people have a bunch of different ideas of why they think this is going to be a good thing. And I also want to point out the Yale University panel that happened. The Gorski is the leader, is the head of the sociological research department at sociology department at Yale. And he had a bunch of different panelists that spoke about this on a bunch of different topics, like, where it is sociologically, what happens psychologically to people and the political outcomes. So it's a 3-tiered different conversation about this particular topic. And what is scary is that everything feeds into each other. It's the snake eating its own tail. The sociological, the psychological, and the political, over and over again. Same rhetoric, and they're all going by feeling. They are not thinking about long-term consequences. That is why we're kind of seeing it cultish, because it's a cult. And because if your dear leader is promising you safety and you are correct, and that isn't, a skeptical mind go, am I wrong? Is that person wrong? But if you're all emotions and wanting to see the things that you want to see come true, you are not going to question it. And that's what's so scary, because this, what's the word? That critical mass that we're heading towards. And I again, please read what's going to happen. Read Project 2025, please. Yeah. Please understand what the fuck is going to happen if this thing comes to pass. So I'm going to say that.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
I'm gonna wrap my section up with just one thing, and that's a message to all you internet people out there.
All of you.
All of them. Yes, all of them. Let me be clear. Christian nationalism is the opposite of patriotic. It is not patriotic. Christian nationalism is treasonous at best. I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, as all military and law enforcement do. I will not violate that oath. We do not serve a human. We serve the country, but more importantly, the Constitution, which preserves the republic called the United States. These traitors do not, and that's enough said.
That is a word. That is a word. And I would like to add to that word that I personally do not believe that any divine providence is at play, especially for Black folks. And I also believe that the quicker that all of us divorce from unsubstantiated beliefs that have not pushed us forward one iota would be best. And I also think that putting Christian nationalism or Christo-fascism in the box of a dangerous dogma that puts one on par with some sentiments that sound like a lot fascism that was very rampant pre-World War II and treated as such would also be best. And I also think that another thing that you all should treat as best is watching more nonprofits content if you click here.